Hello there YouTube, it's your boy B3, back with another kicking graphic novel review. Today we are looking at Saga of the Swamp Thing, Book 2 from the 1982 to 1996 Swamp Thing run by Alan Moore, which is, I would say, the most well-known run of Swamp Thing. Now you guys know I'm a huge Swamp Thing fan. I have reviewed many Swamp Thing books on this channel, including Book 1 of this run. Let me read you something from the back of the book here. From 1983 through 1987, a young British writer named Alan Moore revolutionized the American comic book. His groundbreaking tenure on DC Comics' Swamp Thing set new standards for graphic storytelling and touched off a revolution in the medium that is still expanding today. Building on the title's framework of gothic horror with a remarkably intuitive narrative style and an unprecedented depth of characterization, Moore's vision was realized through the hauntingly beautiful artwork of such collaborators as Stephen Bissett, John Tolpin, Sean McManus, and Rick Veitch. The result is one of comics' most enduring masterpieces. The second of 6 volumes collecting Moore's entire run includes issues 28 through 34 of the Saga of Swamp Thing and Swamp Thing Annual number 2, and also features a foreword by New York Times best-selling author Neil Gaiman, and an introduction by acclaimed Hellblazer writer Jamie Delano, suggested for mature readers. Sorry for the Neil Gaiman name drop. Woof. Yeah, you can skip the foreword. You don't need to read it. I didn't read it. And I think I'll be just fine. Huh? I think I'll be just fine. Anyway, first I just want to say every single cover art is a banger, and I love the art style for the book as a whole. It's grainy, but it's colorful, it's beautiful, and the paneling is some of the most interesting I've ever seen. In fact, Swamp Thing, even runs after this, still often go for very interesting, unique paneling. It's just kind of a staple of Swamp Thing now. But we see Swamp Thing, after finding out he is not Alec Holland, burying Alec Holland to put him to rest. He sees Alec Holland's ghost, buries Alec Holland's body properly, and then he is actually able to move on to the afterlife, which is pretty nice, all things considered. So he is able to help Holland move on, which is good. And it helps him kind of find some inner peace with himself as well. Like, he's not Alec Holland, but Alec Holland is part of him. We also go into this story where Abigail, a lot happens. I feel like I should give a lot of trigger warnings for this, for a lot of weird things. Incest, some kind of sexual assaulty stuff, the murder of cats, things like that. This volume actually made me legit uncomfortable. Volume 1 didn't do that. The volumes I've read past this point haven't really done that. This volume actually kind of made me pretty uncomfortable. So Abigail's husband has kind of turned his life around. He has this job, this great job and everything. But it turns out all his coworkers are reanimated corpses. But not just any reanimated corpses. The reanimated corpses of, horrible killers. And I mean horrible killers. And her husband is also kind of a reanimated corpse. He's still technically alive, but now he is possessed by none other than Arcane, whom many might call Swamp Thing's arch nemesis. They might say it's Jason Woodrow. That's a fine choice too. Arcane, I feel like, is his main nemesis to me. And at this point in continuity, he's still Abigail's uncle. But we do later find out I think it might not be till the New 52, actually. I think it's the New 52 where we find out he's actually her father. And he is a sick puppy, because he's been possessing the body of his family member's husband, and he's been fucking her. They've been going at it. She's disgusted by it. She's exhibiting a lot of behavior exhibited by sexual assault victims, and she has been assaulted, and whew, at least they don't lay it on real thick. It made me pretty uncomfortable, actually. This is a crazy book. But we find out about how Arcane weaseled his way back into the land of the living. And eventually we find out that he is like the avatar of like the gray and the rotten stuff. He's kind of like the death version of Swamp Thing. He is also an elemental. But he's causing this shockwave to go all across the country. And it's deranging people. It even makes the Joker stop laughing. It's making people do horrible things that they wouldn't normally do, like, murder friends and family and put kittens in microwaves, which also made me pretty uncomfortable. A lot of it's not shown in graphic detail, but the way it's described is... God, Moore's writing style is actually incredible. The imagery is insane on every page. It really is. But, you see, Arcane possessed Abigail's husband, who has reality manipulating powers. So now Arcane, in addition to all his crazy powers, can manipulate reality. And he kills Abigail. He kills her just to torment Swamp Thing. And Swamp Thing leads him to his place of power, because Arcane doesn't fully understand what Swamp Thing is. He still thinks Swamp Thing is Alec Holland, who's just been mutated. He doesn't know the power that Holland has. He doesn't know he's an elemental. And this supernatural power is what Arcane is weak against. So Swamp Thing is able to smack him around. But eventually, Abigail's husband takes the reins back, and he's been a huge dick, right? For like this whole run. Alcoholic, womanizer, addicted to his own power, using it to pleasure himself, not attentive to Abigail's needs. In fact, seems to have a lot of disdain and jealousy towards her. He's been a huge asshole this whole book. And now he's laying here. His powers are fading. His life is fading. Abigail is dead and he is dying. And he has enough power to save one of them. And he chooses Abigail. In his last moments, he shows that he really did love her. It really doesn't make up for how he treated her. But it is a very interesting gesture, and not one I super thought he'd make. But he uses his powers to fix Abigail's body, to remove clots in her blood from when she's been dead for a while, to put air in her lungs. Her body comes back to life, but he dies before he is able to get her soul. And I say die, he actually goes into like a coma. But he's not able to grab her soul. And Arcane, with his fancy powers, actually sent it to hell. She is a pure soul in hell. So the demons are kind of going to have a field day with her, because they never have anything like that down there. But Swamp Thing is able to put his consciousness into the green, and from there, weasel his way into purgatory. And then, eventually, heaven. He meets Deadman. Well, not for the first time, but he does meet the Phantom Stranger. I'm actually a pretty big Phantom Stranger fan. I like Deadman. I'm not like a big Deadman fan, but I like him when he shows up. Phantom Stranger, though, I think is really cool. Judas Priest. Very fancy. But they go to heaven, and they see that Alec Holland and his wife are there. Linda? Yeah, something like that. I believe Linda is her name. Yes, it is. Okay, good. I had to check my notes. But they're both in heaven, and they can be in heaven together because of what Swamp... Ooh, loud motorcycle. Because of what Swamp Thing did to help lay him to rest. Very nice. But they need to go into hell. And who's blocking the way to hell? Only one of my favorite DC Comics characters, the friggin' Spectre. And they kind of outwit the Spectre, making him laugh, and he lets them pass. And the art is stunning. It's incredible. It's just... I have no words for it. Of course, Etrigan, who met Swamp Thing back in Volume 1, shows up to kind of lead him around hell. And you see these other horrible demons and, like, people Swamp Thing has killed being tortured in hell. It's pretty wild. One of my favorite parts, I think, is when you see Arcane being tortured. And he's like, Swamp Thing, tell me, how many years have they been torturing me down here? And Swamp Thing's like, what? You went to hell yesterday. And so Arcane has been tortured so heavily that he thinks he's been down there for years. But it's been like hours. It's pretty incredible, in all honesty. But they do find Abigail. They are able to bring her soul back. And it's pretty great. Because I didn't want her to stay dead. But we also have this one weird little story. It's very different, but it's very good. About these, like, cartoonish looking animal astronauts in their little turtle bioship. And they're looking for a planet that they can live on. And they're from a planet where all animals got along. None of them ate each other or anything. And then these apes decided, hey, we're better than all the rest. We're smarter than all the rest. Let's, like, enslave them and eat them and blah, blah, blah. And they go on this journey through the swamp and they commune with Swamp Thing and stuff. And he shows them humans who are basically big apes eating other animals and stuff. But also, the animals on this planet aren't as highly evolved as them. You know, it's kind of natural in a way that animals eat each other because it's the circle of life. It's how energy goes throughout nature. That's just part of it, you know? It's like here, in our Safari Sam series, my crested gecko eats this, like, crested gecko diet fruit paste, and whatever fruit paste it doesn't eat gets fed to the tridivores and stuff, but my gecko also lives with the tridivores that eat the gecko's poop. And then the isopods eat the poop, and the springtails eat their poop, and then the plants eat the springtails' poop. I trim the plants, and then I give the leaves to the tridivores that I have, and circle of life, you know? Their planet didn't work that way, but every planet they visit does work that way. And I guess you could argue that their planet did eventually work that way, but they're just never going to find a peaceful planet. And it's kind of fucked. But the next issue has kind of a recreated cover from the first appearance of Swamp Thing. And we see Abigail go into the dream world. And I don't know if this is the first appearance of these characters, because they were in Sandman. I have read Sandman. And as much as I don't want to promote anything Gaiman's done, because God, the man disgusts me, I do remember them from that. But the way they acted in this makes me think it's their first appearance. I probably should have looked that up before this review. That's my bad. But they give Abigail a choice in the dream world. One of them will take her and give her a mystery, or she can go with the other and he'll give her a secret. But it turns out a mystery you can take back into the real world and remember it, but a secret is harder to remember because you're not supposed to be able to tell it to anybody. There's all these weird mystic rules. But we hear this story, and really it's just a full reprint of the first appearance of Swamp Thing. Story by Lin Wein, art by Bernie Wrightson, who's one of the greatest comic artists of all time, by the way. Rest in peace, King. Anyhow, I've read this before outside of this run. I think I got it like the single issue on Comixology forever ago. It was like free. But yeah, it's about a man who's not Alec Holland developing a similar formula, living with his wife and best friend in the swamp, and his best friend is jealous. He wants the wife, so he kills him, throws his body in the swamp, marries his friend's wife, and then he's going to kill her. Swamp Thing pops out, kills him. The wife doesn't recognize him, so he slunks away in shame. And Abigail's like, no, that's not the story. You have everything wrong. Alec Holland is the Swamp Thing, not this Alex Olsen. And what you're saying happened decades before. And the guy giving her the secret is like, no. You see, that's the secret. They were both Swamp Thing. It's actually very interesting. He incorporates this original retcon story back into continuity. So that it's not, the retcon removed the retcon. So this, pretty much all of the modern Swamp Thing lore was created by Alan Moore and team. They made it so that he had Alec Holland's like memories and stuff. It wasn't Alec Holland. They made him the Elemental, and they created the Green, and now they're doing the whole there's more than one Swamp Thing. There have always been Swamp Things. There will always be Swamp Things as long as there is plant life. Things like that. Pretty incredible, actually. But yeah, and it turns out these two guys are actually Cain and Abel as well, and this is kind of like their punishment. And, you know, Cain and Abel, it's just, Cain is the murderer, and he's being punished for committing the first murder. And when Abigail asks why Abel is being punished, he says it's for being the first victim. And I'm like, woof, a lot to unpack there. You know what I mean? But Abigail wakes up and she can't quite remember all those details, unfortunately. And she visits her husband in the hospital. He's still in a coma. He's basically a vegetable, which is ironic because, well, maybe ironic's not the word I'm looking for. But the person she really wants to be with is also a vegetable. She's with her husband in the hospital. She's like looking at him, but she doesn't want to be there. She feels bad for him, but she wants to be in the swamp with Swamp Thing. And she kind of realizes that she loves Swamp Thing. And she confesses that to him, and he confesses to loving her for a very long time, and they start a relationship. She's married, her husband's in a coma. Is it cheating? Yes, but the man's in a vegetative state. I mean, what do you expect the woman to do? You know? There is a debate to be had about this. But in probably one of the most beautiful sequences in all of comics, see, they can't have traditional sex, right? But Alec Holland grows this fruit out of himself. Abigail eats it, and then she starts tripping balls, and they become one in spirit. And there are these insane panels, this crazy art where like the two of them become one, and she sees the world his way, and it's like a big poem with incredible art. Like, I can't even begin to describe the art in this sequence. I really actually can't. You have to read it yourself. It's one of the best single issues I've ever read in my life. Which makes this one of the best trades I've ever read in my entire life. Saga of the Swamp Thing, Book 2, by Alan Moore and team, is incredible. It's one of my favorite trades of all time. This is one of my favorite comic runs of all time. You have to read Alan Moore Swamp Thing. It gets dark. It gets creepy. If you don't want a really dark book, if you want something more optimistic, there's a lot of great Flash and Superman out there. So yeah, there's some dark stuff in this book. There's some things in here that might make you uncomfortable. Keep that in mind. But wow, it's a good book. It is a really, really good book. But that is it. Thank you all very much for your support. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. Check out all the cool links down in the description below. Facebook, Twitter, etc. And I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.